The search for Flight 370 has been called the most difficult in human history, and in that respect, it's an apt comparison to the search for the Titanic. Hunting for wreckage at the bottom of the Atlantic took more than 70 years. And like the search for Flight 370, it was also hindered by bad weather, poor search strategies, and technological difficulties. To focus on some of the problems with the technology, I'm joined by Jules Jaffe. He's a research oceanographer at the University of San Diego, and he helped design the optic technology that discovered the Titanic. Welcome, Jules.
Thank you, Carol.
I'm excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
You called the technology in the search for Flight 370 lame. Why?
Oh, I'm sorry if I use that expression. I would say the technology is inadequate, and we could do a much better job if we had better marine technology. I think the disproportionality between the size of this boat, that's wonderful boat that the Australians are using, and this little fish, little yellow fish with one hydrophone on it, it's a tough thing. You're only in one place at one time. And right now, we could envision much better search tactics using fleets of unmanned vehicles, say, which would be a lot less expensive.
Well, why don't we have those things available?
We're still in a pretty primitive state for doing that, partly because it's mostly research, and partly because there's not a huge commercial market. I mean, if one of these flights goes down every 5 years and we retroactively realize we don't have the tools to do the job, there's not a huge financial incentive to develop those tools.
Well, maybe there will be now. Who knows? Well, let's talk about the ping.
I hope so.
Me too. Let's talk about those pings they are detecting. The pings are far from guaranteed.
Sure.
The pinger battery could die at any moment. Should we switch to a visual search like the one that you developed in the search for the Titanic?
Yeah, the thing about sound is it goes much further underwater, which is why many of the experts you've been having online have been talking about using sonars. You can see a couple of football fields to the side with an underwater vehicle while you're mapping along. With a visual system, I was trying to think of an analogy. You're sort of limited to half or a quarter of like a basketball court at a time. And the other thing you have to remember is that these vehicles are moving very slowly, probably the same speed as a fast walker. So given the limited field of view and the limited vehicle sort of movement, it's going to be a long time before you can search 19,000 square miles or however many their prime minister is now saying we've narrowed it down to.
18,000. That's the number today,
Thank
anyway.
You.
Okay. Do you see any parallels in the search for this missing jet and the search for the Titanic?
Well, it's a long time. I think it's 70 years later. We've got a lot more stuff going for us in terms of new technology. The Titanic, when it was lost, there were a number of ships that were close by that we had a locus. We knew the path of the Titanic. We didn't see it make a left turn and then go 1,000 miles in a different direction. So I think we really had a much better idea where it was. Maybe uncertainties of 100 square miles, certainly not the kind of numbers we're talking about today.
Well, and I've been dying to ask you this question. So why did it take 70 years to find the Titanic if we kind of knew where it went down?
I don't think we have the technology for deep submergence. I mean, of course, the navies have been running submarines for a long time. And as you probably are aware of, the search for the Titanic was really paid for sort of up front by going back and looking at Scorpion and Thresher, which were these two Navy assets that were lost. And so I just think we didn't have the technology at the time. It was still pretty deep, over 12,000 feet. And the best way of going that deep has always been in these bathyscaphs. And as Bob Ballard once described to me when I first started working with him almost 30 years ago, it's a long elevator ride down. You got 2 or 3 hours on target, and then it's a long elevator ride back up.
And another question I've wanted to ask you, why do you think we have this continued fascination with the Titanic?
Well, this is something I've thought about for a long time. These natural disasters that occur with public transportation, like the one we're seeing now, sort of get us all kind of anxious. I mean, we all fly, we all take trains, we all take planes. The Titanic was a great leveler. As you probably recall, there were people in all different classes. The Macy's were on board. You had people in steerage. So I think from a humanistic point of view, it was kind of very sort of sobering for everyone to realize we're all here and we're all sort of got the same liabilities in terms of what we do and where we go. And I think that equalization factor made it a very sort of warm story for people to reflect upon, plus sort of the fame of the people that were on that ship.
Okay, one more question, because I'm finding this really fascinating. So when you guys finally located the Titanic after decades,
right,
what was that feeling like?
Well, I was on shore. I was actually fielding media, much like this. There was a big feeling of elation because, you know, it was a victory for the technology in terms of us that are very interested in ocean exploration. It was really a demonstration to the public that we can go places, we can discover things in the ocean that we hadn't been able to do before. So from an engineering point of view, it was a huge success.
Jules, Jaffe, thanks so much. I appreciate your being with me this morning.
You're very welcome, Carol. Very welcome.
Still to come in the newsroom, a bus